Okay, let's get going. Thank you all for being here. I wasn't quite sure what was going to be today, but as you can see, a peaceful scene of Tel Aviv behind me, something that many of us had not expected today would be. Although I never really thought that Trump was going to attack, it certainly seemed that way going into Friday night and certainly going into last night. All the indications were there was going to be an attack last night. And then, of course, woke up once in the middle of the night, much to my surprise, all quiet. Woke up very early in the morning, still quiet, went back to sleep. And then, of course, at 7 something, I finally got up, looked at my phone, and there it was, an announcement that peace had broken out throughout the world. That's what happened, right? Peace in our times. That was what Trump said. Well, maybe not peace in our times, but certainly peace with the Iranians. They've agreed to open the Straits of Hormuz. They've agreed to stop the nuclear program. They've agreed to all the things which they didn't agree to. But what's to stop President Trump from making up another story, one of many, many stories that we've seen? This has been a replay. I'm not sure it's the sixth time, the eighth time. I'm not sure how many times this has gone on over the last 3 months where Trump has threatened to attack, threatened to attack. Last minute, he doesn't attack. Now, don't you get me wrong, as you all know who follow what I write, I was not in favor of the attack, mostly because I don't know what it could accomplish. I understand the need for an attack because we're in a terrible strategic position of having lost the war. That's effectively what has happened. And an attack seems like, well, at least you can attack. Maybe things will come out differently. And there was a chance that if you attack and if everything goes right, maybe things will come out differently. But not likely. That's the problem. It's not likely there's much to be done that would change the direction of this regime. The plan was to take out the electric plants, and that would, focus the regime, convince them to make changes. The only problem with that is the Iranian people generally are without electricity at least half the time, if not more than that. So we're going to cut out whatever electricity they have, and then what? Is that going to get them to revolt and go up against the Revolutionary Guard that has no problem shooting and killing them? I don't think so. And so we're stuck in this terrible strategic uh, dead end. That's effectively what it is a dead end. As I said before, a different president might have handled it differently, leaving aside whether they should have gotten involved in this to begin with, and would have listened to his intelligence briefings, that this made no sense. But assuming they did, a different president might at this point go hat in hand to the Europeans, hat in hand to the American people, to the Democrats, and say, listen, it was a mistake to get into this war, but we cannot allow the Iranians to have won the war and maintain a grip on the Strait of Hormuz. We need your help. But he can't do that. He can't admit making mistakes. He can't go and ask the Democrats for anything. He can't ask the American people for anything because he can't give a cogent speech. That's the problem here. There's been no cogent speech explaining what's going on other than we can't let Iran have nuclear weapons. Okay, we all agree with that. But how does he intend on achieving that? He doesn't want a JCPOA because that's what Obama had. Well, that was working, but we can't go back to that. So what are we going to go do? And so is this unclear objectives. There is an attempt to achieve, well, a talk of achieving by military means what hasn't been achieved the first two times of military means, especially after both times it was announced that it had been a total victory. Certainly here in Israel, Netanyahu multiple times talked about the total victory we had over Iran. Oops, wasn't quite a total victory. Oops, there's centrifuges that weren't destroyed. Oops, oops, oops. We're not even sure what's true and what's not true, to be quite honest with you. But the reality is, the Iranians think they won, and they're acting as if they won. And as long as they think they won and act like they won, then they won. That's the reality. Can the United States squeeze them economically? Eventually. Of course, the biggest mistake, there were too many mistakes, but one of the biggest mistakes that were made was the first part of the ceasefire, which allowed the Iranians to sell all their oil. So it immediately injected $12 billion into the Iranian coffers. I won't say into the economy because it didn't make to the civilians, but It went into the IRGC, on top of which it cleared their backlog of oil so that they now can continue to pump oil and don't have to close down oil rigs. So a complete disaster. Just having that 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'm not sure how long that first part of the ceasefire lasted until the Iranians were so not keeping to it that Trump finally did something. The second day, when they hadn't opened the Straits of Hormuz, he should have stopped it, but no. So here we are. Um, Israel's in a tough place strategically. Um, we have to assume that at some point Iran's going to have nuclear weapons. I don't see how we're going to stop that from in the reality of happening. Can we bomb them again? Maybe. Can we bomb them without the American support? Most likely. We did it initially without it, but to what end? Uh, it doesn't take too many. Nuclear bombs are not all that big, and once they have the enriched uranium, it doesn't take large facilities to make bombs. So we're really in a difficult position. Can we up our defensive systems? I'm sure we are. I'm sure we can. I'm sure we're building as many arrows as we can, much faster than the U.S. is building THAADs. And one of the problems, keep in mind, is the fact that the reports that the U.S. didn't have enough munitions is true. Of course, it depends on how you define enough. But the reality is the American industrial base for producing weapons is so slow and so cumbersome that it takes a tremendous amount of time to produce one of the THAAD missiles. That's their equivalent to the Arrow 3. The United States can produce 14 a year. 14 a year. That's the number that's used in a day of these battles. So the U.S. doesn't have enough of them, can't produce enough of them. Patriots are the same. They're not really that effective, but they do intercept some missiles. And I think it's called the SCMs. Those are the sea-launched missiles, are very effective, but also are very expensive and take a long time to produce. So the U.S. doesn't have enough munitions to really fight a long war with Iran. It's an asymmetric war because the Iranians have cheap weapons to use, the drones, which are useless against Israel because they're all knocked down, but they seem to be relatively effective against places like closer in, like Kuwait, where there aren't enough defensive systems in order to defeat all of their drones. And the medium range missiles that the Iranians have many, many of seem to also be very effective against U.S. bases in different places. So it's a difficult situation. And it's going to continue. And the question is, when will it ever end? And no one in this country really knows. I was talking to a friend this afternoon who owns a coffee shop near the hotels, near the beach. And I said to him, "Oh, well, at least, we have a ceasefire. Maybe some tourists will come back." And he laughed at me. What tourists are going to come back when this is going to keep on going, where there's no clear end point? Yes, some people will come, but tourism generally, there is no tourism to Israel right now. Just individual Jews or others who are coming for business or for family, but general tourism, tours with lots of people, Christian tours, these tours, almost none. Almost none. And well, I don't feel so bad for the people who own hotels because most of them are full with Israelis, although the ones up north are still not recovered. The everyone else, the ancillary people, the people who have stores to sell tourist things, and the guides that take tourists around, and you name it, all those people are really, really suffering after 3 years. Many of them have gone on to do other things, obviously, but we've been 3 years without any significant tourism in the country. And now tourism was never that important to Israel. It doesn't even compare to doesn't even nothing compared to high tech and other things, but it still was a substantial source of income for many people, and it does not exist at the moment. And we'll have to see. We'll talk about high tech in a minute because let's talk about a few other things at the same time. So not yesterday, I guess it was Thursday night or Friday morning, President Trump announced agreement with Hamas to disarm. Well, the agreement is not exactly an agreement. There are a lot of gray areas, like any agreement that the United States seems to sign with Trump. Many, many gray areas, many, many other areas that are not clear. And the biggest problem at all is, what will Israel do with the agreement? Without saying whether the agreement is good or bad for Israel, and I can make an argument either way, mostly bad, but there's some possibilities. The current government Can't agree to such a thing. Certainly not 3 months away from elections. The last thing that Bibi can admit to is allowing Hamas to be in Gaza and for Israel to begin to withdraw from parts of Gaza while Hamas still has some weapons or all its weapons or some group. There's first of all, it means giving up the fantasy amongst many on the right that we're going to completely capture all of Gaza. We're going to occupy Gaza. We're going to rebuild Jewish settlements in Gaza. That fantasy has not left them. They still believe that's possible. And they're not willing to give up that fantasy so easily. So he can't agree to withdraw from the yellow line, so to speak. He can hardly agree to even small withdrawals because he promised total victory, and that includes the complete disarmament of Hamas. And as we know, Hamas is not about to completely disarm anytime soon. So, what does he have to offer? And that's a really big question at this point. What the Israeli government can do, especially as President Trump is going to ratchet up pressure on Bibi to make concessions, because Trump wants some victory somewheres. He's not getting it with Iran, obviously. There's going to be no agreement worth the paper it's written in anytime soon. So he's hoping the one thing that he was successful at, and let's give him credit, he got back the hostages and reached some sort of a temporary agreement on on Hamas. And now he wants to double down and take that temporary agreement and make it into semi-permanent. But it's Hamas. It's Hamas with the same ultimate leadership that began October 7th. Hamas should not be allowed to exist. Now, we don't have any way of ending them. That's part of the problem. Realization of our forces, our ability to do limitations that exist, that they exist. There's nothing we can do about it. I know people in the Southern Command are talking, let's go recapture the rest of Gaza. We can finally defeat Hamas. Then the people who are in charge of manpower in the army say, well, wait a second, who are the soldiers who are going to do it? We're going to call more reservists, more than the 100 days they're doing? We can't do it. We can't break them even further. And there are no people who are responsible for world public opinion in this current Israeli government. But those few people who are thinking about it at all can imagine the images that'll come if we try to capture the rest of the Gaza Strip and how many civilians will die while we attempt to do that. And is that worth it? I mean, maybe our image in the world is so bad that, okay, another 10,000, 20,000, who knows how many Palestinians that die won't make any difference. I'm not talking about the morality here at all, please. Don't criticize that. The morality is very real and something one has to talk about, but I'm not. I'm now just talking in terms of national needs, realpolitik. Is defeating Hamas worth another notch, another two notch in losing American public opinion, losing another 10% of Americans supporting Israel? Can we afford that? Can we afford to take that risk? I don't think so. I think our single biggest problem right now is the support of the United States. And I'm not sure we can do a lot about it, but we can stop doing negative things. And negative things would be trying to capture the rest of Gaza because it'll be ugly. And there'll be a lot of civilians who will die if we try to do that. And there'll be soldiers that'll die. And this country doesn't need either anymore. Is there any good solutions? No, there are no good solutions. That's part of the problem. We want solutions, but the Israeli defense doctrine was to have short, decisive wars that would gain us 5, 10 years of peace between the battles. And that's more or less what happened until this war. Now, we didn't start this war, and we didn't have a decisive war against Hamas in the many years in between, which we probably should have, but we didn't. But this war has gone on now for 3 years almost. October makes it 3 years. And the Israeli people, the economy, all of those things just can't take more war. Look, I started talking about the attack that didn't happen in terms of Iran. I don't really want to think about the psychological impact it's having on all of us. Yes, war, no war, going to sleep. There's going to be a war tonight. No, there's not going to be a war tonight. Oh, I can travel. No, I can't travel. My trip's going to be canceled. No, I can't make plans. Oh, by the way, if I want to make a plan, it's impossible to get a plane reservation because everyone wants to go on El Al, and El Al has no seats available for the next 2 months, basically anywheres. That's practically the case. You can find one or two seats here and there. If you trek every day, you can get yourself a seat. But if you're not willing to pay for business, it's very difficult to get out of this country right now if you want to fly El Al. And if you don't want to fly El Al, you're stuck with the possibility that the airline that you're going to fly on may cancel on you. Not exactly a normal situation. I think American Airlines today just announced it's not coming back until March of 2027, almost a year from now. That's American Airlines. Supposedly Delta's coming back next month, but I don't know if I'd go on the poly market and vote and, excuse me, bet that Delta's actually going to end up coming back if we keep on with these yes, no wars. But it's an impossible situation. And yes, whether Israelis can travel or not may not seem to many people to be the highest priority, but understand the psychology of it amongst Israelis is very significant. Uh, Israelis all travel abroad because it's cheaper to vacation abroad than it's to vacation in the country, leaving everything else aside. So it just continues. It's very difficult. It's difficult for everybody except the stockholders of El Al. We're doing very well, mind you, but leave that part aside. So there we go with Hamas. Then we still have Lebanon. And the U.S. is pushing for an agreement on Lebanon, but Hezbollah is not willing to make too many concessions. And the Lebanese government is going to have a really hard time enforcing that agreement. Can they enforce it? Maybe slowly. Maybe if we get the Saudis and others involved, it's possible. But our diplomacy is relatively limited. We really don't. We have a foreign minister who doesn't act as a foreign minister, and he's certainly not anything of a diplomat. And our prime minister, who's the only one who's a diplomat in the whole government, is kind of busy on 10 fronts, mostly concerned about his reelection campaign. But we'll leave that aside for 2 seconds. We'll get to that in a minute. So we have a Lebanese front. We have soldiers in Lebanon. There are incidents from time to time. There's a ceasefire that may or may not hold. Again, not exactly an optimum situation, to say the least. And finally, we have soldiers deep into Syria. I'm not sure why we can't come to an agreement with the Syrians to pull out in return for some sort of a agreement, a security agreement to start with. And the Syrian president has talked about his willingness and interest in working out eventual peace agreement with Israel. I think it's very possible to do it. Of course, the Golan Heights is a problem in the middle, but I think that problem can be overcome with some sort of long-term lease back. The same way the British leased Hong Kong and other places, Israel can lease back the Golan Heights for 200 years or something like that. I'm sure a deal could be reached if we had diplomats who knew how to really act. But it's better for Israel's security program for the election to say, we've extended the borders of Israel. That seems to be the only line that I hear from Likud, why they haven't been a complete disaster in terms of security. We've extended the borders of Israel. Not exactly a great thing to say as if it accomplished anything, but okay. Okay, those are all of our border problems. I won't go in depth too much about our problems in world public opinion in the United States. I think I've written about it enough. The polls are very clear. We've lost a tremendous amount of support over the past 3 years. It didn't start with the war. It was starting beforehand. It didn't happen just because. It didn't happen just because of our actions. Our actions didn't cause all of it, but it didn't help. I think there's a concentrated plan amongst Arab Americans, to have political influence. And being that they're a first generation as opposed to a third generation, they're more committed to their path than a lot of Jews are to supporting Israel or Jewish identity within the United States. Whether you like it or not, there's less assimilation amongst this first generation Arab American community, and yet they want greater representation. We have not seen that amongst most immigrant groups this quickly, and they've been pretty effective. And they've used Palestine, Israel as a leverage point very successfully, leveraging the leftist views of colonial Israel, et cetera, et cetera. But they've been very effective. and we need to understand that they've been very effective. And the APAC and the others have been much less effective. I think partly they're just not used to they're clods. The only way I can put it, they're just not effective in what they're doing, and maybe it'd be very it's very difficult with this government in any case. The big question is when we have a different government, and I'm going to say when at this point because I don't believe it's an if. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but when our new government takes office, which will probably be December because it takes time to actually create a government. There'll be negotiations and arguments and who should be what, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say it's in December. Will it make a difference? Will it be possible to get back at least some of the support that's been lost? Um, I hope so. I don't know. Obviously, a new government will be new policies. Certainly, what Bennett said not a long time ago, but a few months ago, when asked what he would do, he would say, "Stop saying stupid things." That would help. Having ministers that don't say that. If a minister says stupid things, you fire them, and you don't just say, "Oh, great job you're doing there." But Netanyahu does not fire any of them because he needs every single one of them. But in the meantime, um, every time they open their mouths and talk about, expulsion and this and that, killing, it just pushes us down a little bit more in American public opinion and in public opinion in the world. And it leaves us with very few areas to maneuver. Look, everything isn't on us. And I find it interesting. Almost all the reports talk about the fact that, when Mamdani is talking about the fact about genocide, and other people talk about genocide as if Israel has been convicted of genocide. It's only been accused of genocide. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it hasn't been convicted of genocide anyways, and it probably would never be convicted of genocide because the definition of genocide is not this use that's being used of genocide. Has Israel done war crimes? That's a whole other question. But genocide, it just hasn't. But again, that's a secondary item. I think it's going to be a long battle to win back any parts of American public opinion if we can do it at all. But as I've said, and I've made it clear to some of the political people I'm tied to, it's really important that it's done. It's one of the single most important things we need to do. It has to be a priority of the next government to try to do that. In terms of the politics, I don't see a situation where Netanyahu wins this election. It's hard to ever write him off. He's been a very effective politician, much more than he has been a leader, but he's been a very effective politician. Can he win this election? Right now, he has lost enough support that it's really hard to see that happening. I believe that Gadi Eisenkot is most likely going to be the next prime minister of Israel. I think he will actually be performed better than his polling shows. His polling currently shows him a little bit ahead of Netanyahu. And I think we'll see even more so when the election day comes. I think a lot of the people who could will stay home, while all the people who oppose this government are going to come out. Because the people who support this government are not happy, let's put it that way, are not enthusiastic. While the people opposing the government enthusiastically oppose it and want to change to come about, and they will all come out, I think, on election day, and we'll see that. Again, can't write off Netanyahu. He's always been very good at pulling something at the last minute, but I'm optimistic at this point. I have to be because we really can't continue with this government. And again, I'll forget about all the terrible policies. I mean, I may make two last points. Netanyahu stayed in office after October 7th. And one of the reasons in a parliamentary system, the person who fails resigns, like it happens in Britain, is you don't want someone who's made terrible mistakes to keep on being in government because he'll try to double down on the mistakes to try to come up with a winning hand. It's like a gambler who's down at the tables. He gambles wide because he needs to make back his money. And that's what the last Iran attack was. It was a gambler doubling down, but gambling down on our future. And because we allowed him to remain in office, now, again, there are very few things people can do to stop it. But the people as a whole, and the people, particularly in the Likud, who refused to revolt and let him stay in office after the worst day in Jewish history since the Holocaust, those people are responsible for the fact of all the mistakes that have been made since October 7th. And believe me, there have been an awful lot of mistakes that have been made since October 7th, and he's been responsible for. So we can hope for the best. We can hope that there'll be new leadership. Like I said, I'm optimistic that the people of Israel will understand when the day comes that the current leadership can't continue, because the second point I wanted to make was the current leadership is full of incompetent people. And that's beyond Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the competent one amongst a sea of incompetent people. So I'm hoping for the best. I'm slightly optimistic. The next 2 months, a lot of my writing will be about politics, hopefully, because maybe there won't be a war. I don't know. We'll see how that goes forward. I've become involved to some extent this year in the political campaign because I believe it's too urgent not to be involved. But I'll try to do my best to be a semi-detached observer. I can't be totally detached because I care too much about the future of this country to be totally detached. Okay, we've come to the halfway point. Now up open for questions. Raise your hand. Hopefully, I'll see it. If not, my wife will see it and yell at me. So, anyone have any questions? No questions anywheres?
I have a question. Can you speak about how you think Eisenkot might deal with the settlers if
Okay.
he becomes elected in the West Bank?
Going once.
No, no. Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Richard, you asked a
Mark?
question? I don't hear.
Yes, yes.
Hold
I'm
on a
wondering.
second. Am I not? Give me a. Okay, 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, the question was how Eisenkot would deal with settlers on the West Bank. He's made it very clear that he will arrest all the ones who are doing the things that they've been doing. That he won't allow for the illegality that's going on. He'll bring back administrative detentions that existed beforehand. And he'll return law and order to the West Bank. That's more than anything else. It really was not going to require all that much. You know, there are more. It's more than the 20. There are more than the 20 or 100 or 200 people that Netanyahu keeps on talking about. But maybe there are 1,000 people involved. So you can arrest 1,000 people. Right now, they're arresting no one. No one is getting arrested, and if they get arrested, they're getting released immediately. So I think he'll bring back law and order to the West Bank. That's step one. Beyond that, it's going to require a lot of actions. Harvey, you have a question. Harvey, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me
Now
now?
we can. Go ahead.
There was a comment on one of the internet podcasts that there are 750,000 settlers. Is that a correct number? And
Okay.
if that's so, is it how many of them are truly considered quote unquote legal, and how many are not? And is this a tenable situation?
Okay. So I'm not sure it's 750. I think the number is probably closer to 600,000. But understand that about 70% of them are the ultra Orthodox living in the three towns that are just over the border. So Modi'in Elite is considered a settlement because it's inside of the West Bank. It's opposite regular Modi'in, but it's a little bit in. And I don't know. I think there are like 40,000 people just there alone. And there are two other Haredi ultra Orthodox communities in the West Bank, also just over the border. So they make up about half, if not more, of the settlers. Um, there are those that are, the long-term people in Efrat and Dariel and all those places. There are about 50,000 who probably live in the I don't call them the illegal settlements, but the edge communities, etc. Um, Probably 50,000. I don't have the exact number, but they're not insignificant, but they're not 700,000. I think the numbers that I've seen is that based on any police plan that was ever discussed, that only that all but about 50,000 would be within Israel. In other words, obviously Ariel will be part of Israel, and obviously Efrat, all of Gush Etzion, and obviously Maccabi Modi'in, the elite would be part of Israel. So all those places, and so there'll be a question of what to do about the 50,000 that are left. So that's what we're talking about, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Howard.
Hi, Mark. Uh, Thanks as always for doing this. Just a quick thought um, about the perspective and hopeful change of government in Israel and what impact it might have here in the U.S. I think the impact would be substantial. Um, there's a portion of anti-Israel sentiment or anti-Zionist sentiment here, which will never change. It's buried deep inside the sort of leftish or leftist part of the Democratic Party at this point. But I think that there are a very substantial number of people who have just been completely alienated by the actions of the Israeli government over the last 3 years. Um, and I think that is remediable, if only if there is a new government which stops saying and doing stupid things and begins to open itself to the world in a way that will be recognizable as sane and as not ludicrously radical and messianic. If that happens, there will be a change here. I don't know to what extent the change will have practical implications or electoral implications, hard to say, but it will make a difference, a very big difference. I'm certain of it.
I'm glad to hear that. It's certainly an argument here how much the change will be. I agree with you. I mean, I think part of the problem is that Netanyahu and his government just are untouchable. And the first thing I've advised part of the opposition people is the first thing you need to do is dialogue. Talk to people. I said, you're not going to bring Ilan Omar to become a lover of Zion, whatever you do. But you need to talk to everybody. You need to get engaged with J Street. You need to engage with even some of the people that are not quite Ilan Omar, but the people in that direction. You need to talk to them. You can't ignore them. And if you talk, you can make some progress. And I believe what I'm saying is being received with reasonably open ears. Let's put it that way. Again, we'll have to see. The various people who are vying to become prime minister have different levels of English and charisma, et cetera, et cetera. Gadi Eisenkot, who I think will be the prime minister, is probably not the highest one in terms of charisma. He's the anti-charisma guy, but in Israel, he's genuinely loved, and I think he can develop that sort of relationship with people in America as well. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I think Israelis beginning to finally understand that it's a five-alarm fire. Not quite, but they're beginning to understand it's a five-alarm fire, and it is a five-alarm fire without a doubt. So,
and I think his Eisenkot's first order of business will be to recreate a foreign ministry, to really to have actual diplomats who know what they're doing and know what they're talking about.
Right. Well, first of all, he needs a foreign minister. And Netanyahu never wanted a decent person to be a foreign minister. Not that he had who to choose from in the Likud. It was from bad to worse. And Gideon Sa'ar came back and joined him to support him because he was going to save everything because he was a great foreign minister. But except A, he's terribly uncharismatic, and B, he's not particularly innovative, and he's been a disaster as foreign minister. I think it's likely someone like Yair Lapid would be the foreign minister, whose English is good, who's thoughtful, I don't always agree with everything he has to say, but he won't say stupid things. That's quite clear. And I think they'll rebuild the foreign ministry. It's going to take a lot of effort. But look, one of the sad things as an American Israeli, Israeli American, however you want to look upon it, as to everybody there in America, both governments are being run by one person. There is no process going on here in Israel. Netanyahu doesn't make decisions with the National Security. He meets with the National Security Council every couple of weeks. That's Ben Gvir and Smotrich and all those people. But there's no decision process that's being made in any sort of National Security Council. It's something that every single report that's been made of every one of Israel's wars have warned about. You need to strengthen the National Security Council. For most of this war, we haven't had ahead of it. On top of which, look at the United States. There's no National Security Council. I mean, you have a Secretary of State who's also the National Security Advisor. The last time both positions were held by one person was when Kissinger held both of them. And I do say that Marco Rubio is no Kissinger and doesn't have that experience. Leaving aside what you think of Rubio, you don't. And on top of which, there's no staff. There's no staff. There's no expertise. And a completely different topic. I heard someone who, and a China expert, was talking about when Trump went to China. There were no experts. No experts going along. Everything relating to the negotiations with Iran. There were no experts there. I mean, it's an insane situation. The whole, this problem in America of, making light of expertise. I don't care whether it's scientific expertise or diplomatic expertise or historical expertise. It's no way to run anything. And we have something similar, not exactly, but similar here in Israel. So, first and foremost, return the experts. They're not always right. You don't have to accept the word of experts as the word of God, but you have to hear them and see what other people say. And of course, that's not happening neither in the United States nor here. Anyone else? Hey,
Sure.
go ahead.
For most people under the age of 40, Netanyahu is the only person that they've ever known in terms of understanding what Israel is. So the question is, is there any chance of creating a law for term limits, say 8 years, and then that's it, so that this situation doesn't happen again?
I expect that in the first week of the new government, it'll be passed. First of all, they want to make sure that Netanyahu doesn't come back through the back door. So I suspect that the first act of the government will be some version of term limits and some version of someone who's been indicted for a criminal case can't become prime minister. Both those laws will pass almost immediately. They didn't pass during the change government because Ayelet Shaked, for reasons I don't really understand. I guess she still wanted, I don't know, support from Likud. I don't know what her reasoning was. She blocked it. If she hadn't blocked it, we wouldn't be living through the nightmare of another Netanyahu government right now. But she blocked it, but I think this new government, there's consensus amongst everybody, and that might even be passed before the government is sworn in. If the Knesset gets sworn in first, you could literally pass laws without a government. So I could see a scenario with before they can negotiate all the details of the new government, where they would pass a law like that to make sure that Netanyahu doesn't come in through the back door. So yes, the answer is yes. I think everyone realizes the term limits are necessary. 8 years are enough. The United States learned that the hard way with Roosevelt, and however great a president Roosevelt was, it was quite clear that second term, okay. The third term, well, in the middle of the war, but he certainly didn't need a fourth term, and of course he died, at the very beginning of that term. So no question that that's likely to happen in Israel at the very beginning. So we can be optimistic about that. Brian.
Hi, Mark. I wonder if you could expand a bit on your views about the disarmament proposal and comment perhaps on what I see as a risk, which is that a negative response by Netanyahu, by the government, by Israel, is likely to do even more damage to the standing of Israel internationally and seen as being the obstructor. And that's already how that's presented in the UK, in that you can just hear that the tone of the news reports suggests that Israel is going to object to it. So what's the argument for, as you see it, as being a positive thing or some good things in it? What do you think of the arguments against it that are likely to be proposed by Netanyahu?
Okay, so let's talk about the positives first. The positives are, at least theoretically, Hamas has agreed to disarm. That's something they've never agreed to ever. So they're theoretically a revolutionary group who's dedicated to destroying Israel by the force of arms, has theoretically agreed to disarm. That's not nothing, but it's something. I mean, it's not, it's not a lot, but it is something. And I think it could be looked upon positively that something can be built from that. Remember, going all the way back to when Hamas seized power and the quartet tried to get it to accept the agreements that the Palestinian Authority had made with Israel. And therefore, the United States and Russia and the members of the quartet would recognize the Hamas government. They refused to do that because they refused to give up the armed struggle. They refused to give up their arms. That was an ideological decision by them, not a practical decision. So the fact that they're ideologically willing to talk about giving up the arms is a positive thing. The problem with it is the devil is in the details. And the devil is what arms, when will they give him back, and what's the sequence of events? And therein lies all of the problems. And who's going to make sure that they're actually disarmed? And if Israel pulls back to the international waters with Gaza, who's going to protect the settlements inside of Israel? I don't see Israel ever pulling back. I don't see a situation where they won't leave at least a kilometer no man's land around the border. There will be a dead zone that anyone goes there is dead, literally. So I don't see that anytime in the future. What about opening up the border to Egypt and all those things? Well, someone has to control to make sure that Hamas doesn't get any new arms, and all of these things. So that's the negative. Any pullback is a negative factor. Any placement of international troops limits what Israel can do in terms of attacking Hamas. Now, Israel's been attacking Hamas daily for the last couple of weeks. It's increased its attacks, killing anyone who's involved in October 7th. I have this mixed feeling. On one hand, they all deserve to die. On the other hand, it doesn't exactly build the possibility of creating any sort of peaceful or medium-term peaceful relationship. Can one be created? I'm not naive. I don't think we can reach peace with Hamas in this generation. I don't know that we can do it the next generation. And then, of course, you get to what you just asked. We can't be the ones who say no. We need to maneuver so it's Hamas who ends up saying no. And again, we're not part of the negotiations. This is a really terrible situation. Negotiations are taking place over our heads. So, if we were involved in negotiations, we could try to frame it in a way that gives us an advantage of some kind. But we're not part of these negotiations. The United States is involved with talking directly to the Hamas. We're out of the loop. And so, we have limited impact. Look, Netanyahu got deep into bed with Trump. Trump is not a person who you want to get into bed with. He's great in some ways. It's been a great ride in some ways, but long term, it's a terrible situation to be in. That's the situation we're in right now, because we have no idea what he's going to want to do, when he's going to want to do it, and hasn't been thought out, and what influence do the Qataris and what influence do the Saudis have. And you look at all the corruption that exists in this administration, you have absolutely no idea, which way is out, which way is north, which way, what does he want? Why does he want it? So we're again in a terrible situation regarding Gaza too. Regardless, we lose or we lose, whichever way it goes, we lose. Again, the other side of the coin, though, and I have to say this, is Israel has overcompensated for October 7th. What do I mean by that? We don't need more territory to defend for October 7th. We need to have an army that's there. October 7th was a disaster because the army was not there on October 7th ready to fight. If the army would have been there, not a million troops, not 100,000 troops, 2,000, 3,000 troops who would have been armed and ready on October 7th, Hamas would have been decimated, and that would have been the end of the story. but we weren't there that day. That was the failure. And we don't need to occupy more Arab land in order to make sure that doesn't happen again. We do have to maintain an army on our borders and be ready for the worst case scenario. And that requires a little bit of a different defense strategy. So that's the pluses and minuses as far as I can see.
Is Eisenkot has he declared a position on the disarmament, or is he waiting seeing as to?
Okay, Eisenkot is going to make is going to say as little as he can. Let me put it that way. He will win the election if he doesn't make a mistake. You make a mistake by opening your mouth. I mean, too much. And so he's going to say as little as he can. He just said something. I didn't see it came across my computer, but it went away. He's going to say as little as he can. I have a pretty good idea where his head is at and what he believes, and I think they're all good. But he's going to say as little as he can. Because, like I said, open your mouth, and if you put your foot in it one time, you can lose an election. So he will be quiet. Only say what he has to say, and only say things that he knows are going to be popular. And that's, he's running for election. Let's keep that in mind. He can do nothing if he's not elected. So,
thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, everybody. I thank you for joining me. Many of you will hear from me in the next week or so. My book is finally about getting close to coming out. It's going to be released on September 1st. But we may have some pre-release versions available for people. I will be in touch with some of you. So I look forward to telling you all about the book, and hopefully many of you will buy it, review it, talk about it, push it amongst your friends, etc., etc. It's not a small book. It's over 700 pages, so it's not an easy read either. It's on Israel It's an easy read. I'm being yelled by my wife who edited most of it. Whatever. It's not an easy read because it covers some difficult topics. How about that? It covers Israel from Oslo through this past war. And it ended with, I thought I was going to end it with the return of the last hostage body, but then I had to put an afterword for the second Iran war. So hopefully I don't need an afterword of an afterword. And let's hope for the best. So I thank you all. And we'll do this in a month or so again.
Mark, I had one last question.
Sure, go ahead.
You said indicted for a felony, but that's not convicted of a felony. So for running for office.
Right. Because, okay, so Israeli.
I can see things falling apart.
Okay, so
people start making, claims against people, so they get indicted and can't run.
Okay, so let me explain two parts to it. First of all, getting indicted is not a simple thing in Israel. In order for a politician to be indicted, the police have to recommend it. The attorney general has to approve it. It has to approve before a committee of where the other side gets to present the negative case of why the person shouldn't be indicted. It has to go through a full process. A minister cannot be a minister if he's been indicted. He can be a Knesset member, but he can't be a minister.
What's the difference? I'm sorry. Between a Knesset member and a minister.
Okay, a minister being the foreign minister, the minister of interior, etc. That'd be a minister. The prime minister can be because of a loophole in the law. The loophole in the law, when it was first brought forth the idea, if you forced the prime minister to quit because he was indicted, it would bring down the government. If you forced the minister to leave, it wouldn't bring down the government. Okay. No one expected that someone would be indicted and then run again.
Right.
In other words, that's what no one expected. In other words, if you go back through the history of the Netanyahu case, when he was first investigated, everyone said, "Well, if he's investigated, if the police recommended he be indicted, he'll resign." Well, when the police recognized him being indicted, the thought was, okay, we'll wait for the Shimur. That's when he gets to present his case. If in the end it's decided to indict him, he'll definitely resign. And even members of the Likud said he would resign if that happened. But he didn't. Right. But then on top of everything else, he decided to run again. And the Supreme Court, there was no way to stop him because of that decision, which no one had anticipated. It's one thing to, the logic of saying the government will fall if you vote. If you force someone not to run, that's one thing. If you force someone to resign, that's one thing. But to say that he can run again, and then they had the ridiculous idea, well, the people will decide. But the Israelis don't vote directly anymore. They vote for a party, and a party wins by coalitions. And the majority of people don't want him to be prime minister, but he ends up being prime minister anyway. So that's not, it's not like there's a referendum. Do we want this indicted criminal to run for be prime minister? That wasn't on the ballot. People voted for Likud. People voted for the ultra orthodox. We voted, etc. So it was a very poor decision by the Supreme Court, but that was the law. And so there needs to be a new law because Netanyahu said it best when Olmert was being investigated. He said someone can't remain prime minister while he's being investigated. This is before he's being indicted, because we will not be able to tell which of his decisions are being made for the good of the country or for his own criminal political needs. And here we've had it X to the whatever. And that's clearly been the case. And so Netanyahu was right. Of course, it just didn't apply to Netanyahu. It applied only to Olmert. So that's why indictment.
So it's very different than here when you're accused, like you have, like the main guy who was accused of rape. He's accused, but he's not.
Okay, accused is not indicted. Don't forget, there was no indictment against him. There was an accusation.
Right.
There are three stages. I accuse you of a crime.
Right.
And then even in the United States, either has to be a grand jury that says you should be indicted. It used to be say that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. But we've seen recently in Washington that even the grand juries in Washington have been saying no to the Trump administration.
Thank God.
So that's one part of it. But then even an indictment in America is much easier to get. It's much quicker to get an indictment. Israel is a more complicated and drawn out process, especially for a politician. So
thank you for clarifying.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much. Have a good end of the summer, or the rest of the summer, however you want to call it. And I'll be in touch. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye.